I'm Karla Marie Sweet, and this is the PlayMakers Podcast, the podcast that's all about platforming creative conversations with theatre makers from all parts of the industry. This episode's guest is Christina Corrigan. Alice is a visually impaired actor, writer and theatre maker based in Manchester. She is all about breaking down barriers and creating accessible theatre, and she spent years working on inclusion in the industry. Audio description and access consultancy are her bag, and it's all about ensuring that rehearsal spaces and theatres are safe and inclusive. When making her own theatre, Alice uses rich audio descriptive language, creative captioning and sound design to make dynamic, creative and accessible theatre. Welcome to the show, Alice.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always great when someone else introduces you, because it sounds way better. If it's alright with you, I'd like to just do a little bit of an audio description just for those that might be watching us on the cameras. Don't look too closely at the naked mole rat that you have in front of you right now, but I am a white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I'm wearing a electric blue jumpsuit today, matching. Very warm on this very cold day, and I have blonde hair which is half up, half down today, and I'm really excited to be here.
Amazing. And I am an African American and white British mixed race woman with dark curlyish, wavyish hair that is just past my shoulders. I'm wearing a funky floral colourful shirt with red and cream and blue and green, and what else?
That was pretty solid.
Yeah, I think I've covered all my bases. Would you like to talk a little bit about why audio description is so important?
Yeah, sure. Well, audio description, for those who don't know, is for the blind and visually impaired community, and describes action that might be happening on stage or watching like a Netflix documentary. You can have the audio description on, and it just gives us an element of detail, descriptive language that without it we may not be aware of what's going on visually. So it just helps us to have, I guess, the auditory descriptions of what's going on visually. There's many different ways to go about it, but in my opinion, when it's wicked is when it's really creative and embedded, so that we can kind of look at changing the additional audio description that we add on, and often can make it very like two-dimensional, and actually bringing it into the 3D and like the world of writing and the world of like everyday. So just like incorporating audio description into a conversation like this, for those who may never have done it before, is just a really, really wicked way of just making it more mainstream, I guess. Yeah. So I often see a bit of kind of description written on people's Instagram posts, you know, something like, I am a cis-het man who is, and a description of what they're wearing. How is that useful to people who are perhaps partially sighted or blind? Yeah, that's a really good question. So you have the option to put alt text on images that you might add to a tweet or on Instagram, I believe. Loads of different places, but alt text is made for those who might use screen readers, which essentially magnifies your screen, and it tell you that alt text, so that if you need, I guess, like, so it'll speak it out loud. Yeah, screen readers, not always, but for the most part, the settings would be that it will speak with you, give you that little bit of information. But also, I guess, for those who don't use screen readers, which is a really fascinating, like a really important conversation, I think, within the community, because not all of us do use screen readers. Mm-hmm. So it's about actually like the alt text typically is really, really useful when it comes to screen readers being able to get the same piece of information. But alt text can be really useful for those who may have some vision. I believe the statistic is around 8% of visually impaired or blind people are fully without sight. Okay. Which is a really, really, really low statistic, right? Yeah. So many of us may be able to see a photo in theory, but the alt text can give a level of description that maybe would be overlooked by somebody who isn't part of that community. So it's just really nice. I guess it's it's about allyship, isn't it? So
definitely
put alt text on your tweet photos.
Love it.
Please. But
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of why it's there.
I guess we should also tell the audience, and not just the visually impaired audience, but everybody where we are speaking from today, which is the Box of Tricks headquarters at the Yard.
Headquarters.
Yeah.
Box of Tricks HQ.
Box
I love
it
it.
does make us sound like superheroes, like Avengers,
great.
doesn't it? I quite like that. So the room that we're in right now has lovely exposed brick, which sometimes might mean it's a little bit cold, but it looks very cool. And a really nice carpet, which nobody can see, but I absolutely adore. And I'm really excited to have Alice on the show today. Alice, I want to ask you the question that I've asked pretty much everyone who's been on the podcast, certainly in season 1. Why theatre? Of all the mediums that you could have chosen, why have you chosen theatre? Oh dear, is this a question you've been asking yourself a lot recently?
Why? I don't know what anyone that works in theatre that isn't asking themselves that after the last couple of years. No, but I actually think that kind of relates to the answer, because it's not an easy industry. We'll start with the negative, but I will land on the positive. It's not an easy industry, and there's been quite harsh cuts to the art sector in general, but predominantly kind of to really hit theatre. And as I branch more so, I guess, into TV and that world, and meeting people who work in a completely different part of the industry, what I find fascinating is when I talk about the theatre that I do, everyone I've spoken to, well, about 95% of the people I've spoken to all talk about how they began with theatre and how theatre is their love and their passion, and if theatre had a bit of a different landscape, they would love to still be in that. And that is, for me, I guess that gravitational force that always will ground me within theatre. It's a completely organic and live experience that we create night after night, and the rehearsal process that is so enriched within the body of the text, and you really build up that world in such a unique way that's really hard to explain to people that don't, I guess, work within theatre or understand why we slave away on a show for 2 nights or whatever, because there is nothing like it. So for me, I guess that's why, because nothing in the world compares to what theatre can do, what the power of theatre can do. I think so many people have these stories of a show they might have watched when they were young that completely switched it for them, and that to me is the most exciting thing about theatre, because you just don't know whose world you can change from the show that you put on or are a part of. It's magic.
So was there a show for you that you watched when you were younger that just really changed things and inspired you?
I think for me it was more so because acting was my thing that kind of went into it more so than writing, I'd say. I think the writing one came a bit later in terms of I want to make something like that. When I was young, it was I was 9 or 10, it was being a part of school productions. Yeah. And the world of musicals, which I am not a musical girl. I cannot sing. I can hold a note, right? But you're not going to catch me doing some A flats. But it was I guess the what's the word?
Just being exposed to
how elaborate the world of musicals are. Chicago was a big one for me, but being a part of it. Yeah. The moment when I was a kid, I was like, I don't know what area of this world I'm going to work in, but I want to work in it.
Yeah.
So I guess it was that exposure. Whereas when I got older, it was a Constellations, I think, was such a standout play for me that I was like, I want to create stuff like that. But I think within my work now, I tie together trying to make work accessible, but also provide opportunities to access theatre, because I know that it changed the course of who I became by being exposed to it, and I know that that's becoming far, far less prevalent in the young generation. But also being able to make work that is creatively stimulating at the same time.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about constellations is that it's one of those plays that's so intimate and so kind of small scale but intricate at the same time.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes when you have that smaller cast, particularly if it's, you know, a one-person show or a two-hander, there's that level of kind of treading the line between it feeling intimate and it feeling claustrophobic. And I think it's something that you've done so beautifully in your play Fade, which I have read the script of. It's a stunning text. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what the inspiration behind Fade is, and without giving too much away, give us kind of a short summary of this brother-sister story.
Yeah. Wow. So Fade is traditionally a two-hander, but is with a cast of 4. And it follows twin siblings, Cassie and Ruben, as they come to terms with their mother's sudden death. And it thrusts the two of them back together again. And throughout that, we follow 2 major time frames within the show. We've got 2010, which is as present as we get. And then we have another time frame which just transcends 3 different memories of their life to hopefully make what we witness in that present time make sense. My brother was like my massive inspiration when it came to writing this. As much as it's not about me and him, I knew that I wanted to create a show that really honoured a brother and sister relationship in particular. I'm really fascinated by how your childhood can really implicate your adult life. And I guess Sliding Doors, which is a film, but I guess the concept of Sliding Doors of like all of these parallel versions of you can exist at the same time, and one decision can change everything. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Just that.
Yeah, you're just talking about all my favourite movies here.
Wow.
This is
so
the multiverse of Alice, Christina, Corrigan.
yeah. It's just one universe, and it's like so many. I guess the fundamental of it was really showing the allyship of siblings, whilst also really delving into that fascination I have with unpacking childhood when you're older.
Yes.
And how decisions can change your whole life, and that's exactly it. Yeah. Everyone, or at least I guess this like generation of like people, I guess between their like 20s and like mid 30s now, are really kind of the first generation who have had the capacity to be able to look back and question their upbringing.
Totally.
And I think there's something really prevalent within that. And so I knew, I guess I didn't know when I was going into writing it, but that for sure has become something that's been really, really important with it. But I was part of the Royal Court writing programme last year.
Wow.
And I was like, thanks guys.
That's amazing.
It was incredible. It was the online cohort.
Yeah.
So every week we'd meet and have a different exercise to do something. And the only thing I did go into it thinking was, I want a two-hander with a brother and a sister.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why it's been so free and organic when it came to writing it, because I just went off of these exercises and wrote idle scenes, and it became more and more clear. Whereas when I wrote Past Life, that felt far more like I knew where I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
But this one, I kind of let the text lead me to the next step. And we did an R&D of it earlier this year, and we've just finished a creative access R&D. Recent for me now, but by the time people are seeing and hearing this, the show's nearly on, so it's very crazy. But we won't think about that. I've got to redraft it. Hope future me has.
Yeah.
Please.
Fingers crossed for future Alice. And of course it's directed by Box of Tricks' very own AD, Hannah Terrell Pinder. What was it like working with Hannah on this?
An absolute privilege. I've worked with Hannah as an actor a lot through Box of Tricks, and I do think the work that Hannah and Adam have done through Box of Tricks, through these like rehearsed readings or like doing an R&D of another text, already really helped in a way to really mould me as a writer, which is really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
But I think for sure like R&D spaces really kind of do that for actors. And
I think that writing is acting and acting is writing.
Right.
Whenever I'm writing something, I'm playing those characters, and whenever I'm performing something, I'm thinking about the writing.
Yeah.
So it one hand feeds the other, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly. It's definitely something that I've realised is like how they can really help each other.
Yeah.
I feel like I've become a better actor the more I've written.
Yeah.
And how my writing has really excelled because of spaces that I've been in.
Yeah.
But being able to bring Hannah in then to direct my piece felt incredible, and she worked on the R&D earlier this year, and it was just great in that initial like that week to see the way her brain unpacks and questions and can bring out the best of the text, and I feel I can trust her fully with it.
Yes.
Because she's pushing me to ask big questions within the text, and also knows where it needs to get to kind of even before I do, like bringing that out of the actor. So it's wicked. I'm buzzing to be working with her on this. Yeah, it's amazing.
So I was in the room when you were kind of talking about casting, and I was wondering even then whether at any point, because obviously, you know, with your previous show, Past Life, it was your show and you were in it, and you know, obviously you are an accomplished actor as well. So were you ever tempted with Fade to cast yourself as one of the siblings?
No. I think that's been like a lot of people are like, oh, you're going to be in it, and I'm like, no. I guess if it felt right, then watch me like randomly I'm in it, and I'm going to be like, no. But I think for me, I write stories. I write to tell stories. I don't write to put me in them if it doesn't feel like it matches what the character is. And I think the shift from a 1-person to a 4-person was not really my intention. I really wanted originally a 2-hander, but I wrote it without audio description at the core of my thinking. So I let myself be led by the creation, knowing that audio description and the world of creative access would then be put in.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that this came at a later point, but in those initial early steps of writing the draft, instead of Past Life where I lended myself to the access, I wanted to prove a bigger point that no matter what the text is and your creative goals and ambitions with it, you can take it and you can make it accessible.
Yeah.
And so that's why it then became a 4-hander in the R&D. I was like, let me try and see what this looks like. And it just unlocked so many creative doors, and at points we are led far more with the creative access than we may be if it was just still that 2-hander. But to go from that and to go from an experience where like I was making it up as I went along with Past Life and applying for things and kind of working out how you get a show on and Arts Council bids and anyone please like program me, I don't know what I'm doing.
All the fun stuff.
It was great to then I guess really be able to reflect and look at that I now have a team and a cast of 4, and know that my work exists without me having to be in it, and I think that's a longer goal of me. I want my work to be able to stand alone without me having to be at the forefront of either being in it or doing every job, because I know we're all jack of all trades in this. We all can do a bit of everything. And because we love it, again it leads back to that gravitational feeling we have when it comes to theatre and making art. But knowing, I guess, so where my passions or where I best sit is useful when it comes to creating work. And what, again, with Fade, what's been great with when we landed funding is to be able to, the team that I've built up together, a mixture of experienced and emerging, being able to learn from each other and build up a new creative captioner and bring in audio description consultants and people that may not have done sound design before but worked with music. So being able to give everyone just as much gravitas to learn and expand their work as well as me. And I wouldn't be able to do that, I think, if I was not so passionate about making a change in the industry rather than making work for myself. If that makes sense.
That does make sense. My question then is, does that mean you're not going to write any more work for yourself? Do you feel like that part of your creative journey has passed and it's not something you want to continue to pursue, or?
I don't think I wrote Past Life with the intention to put myself in it.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay, that's interesting.
I started writing it as part of my MA thesis, which questioned how I can make a show accessible for blind and deaf audiences.
Do you want to talk a little bit about then what Past Life was about and where the genesis of the idea came from?
So that was the question that I was answering through the academic, and then you alongside it, you could create like a 20-minute recorded piece or live, and that's where the beginnings of Past Life began.
But in terms of the plot and the character, where did they come from?
Yeah, so that it was completely idle away from the question, which was great, and it was about the Past Life question is the normalisation of sexual assault in relationships, and we follow Kira through reflecting on her past life. See what I did there? Through a diary entry that she kept when she was going through a breakup. And we start off, we think it's just a normal breakup, and it turns out it wasn't. And for me, I went through an R&D process kind of after the initial, I'm going to make a show about a breakup and just see where it kind of goes. And I was inspired originally from Tame Impala's album Currents, because the whole album follows a breakup.
Yes. So good.
And you can kind of see that in the sound score with the inspo. I hope anyway, definitely not Tame Impala, but God loves a trier. But when we went into the R&D process of it, I was really keen to make sure that it was never autobiographical ever. But the moment you put one person on a stage, the biggest question is, I wonder if it was real. And we're human, we're curious.
Yes.
Fought against that for the last 4 years because I was like, oh, Mum, Dad, it's not about me. I really do promise. What it is about is these 5 women that I got together in a space to create our shared understanding and experiences in a safe environment to really pose the question on a stage and go, this is really normal, and what we've just portrayed to you is an ever so mundane, quote unquote, take of something that is very, very normal, and I wanted to be able to validate an audience through that. And the research and development of that piece was really integral to solidify what that is.
There's I think there's definitely something in kind of saying this hasn't happened to me, but it has happened to a lot of people. And it's something that could happen to me one day. It's something that could have happened to me, and also there's a sliding scale when it comes to the sexual violence that women are on the receiving end of. And you may not have necessarily experienced what Kira has experienced, but you've experienced something further along that spectrum or that sliding scale. I didn't want to put on stage ever my experience.
And it was I wanted an audience to be able to maybe see something that they could relate to, because there was definitely like I guess it was just really like trendy. It's not the word. To make shows about sexual violence, so I felt like I was seeing a lot of them. It was trending, right? And there was something.
Maybe because maybe it was trending because it was a conversation that was just in the zeitgeist because of things that we were seeing on the news.
Absolutely,
so like, we need to have a nice conversation about.
And
this.
It was also kind of similar. It was around the time. Well, I started it in 2019, so it really hit COVID. But there was an uproar of one-person shows. For logistical reasons, it's cheaper and safer, and they're great storytelling, but I'm interested to see I guess some reflection in a few years, this like uproar of one-person shows. But there was still to me a dramatization that goes alongside these stories that can make an audience feel like that's not that, I still can't see me in that. And I can't talk for everyone that saw Past Life. I can only say for myself and the work that had gone into it was a lot of how can we tell a piece of theatre which at the core of it is a story that she even questioned if it was or wasn't. Rather than me going on stage and being like, this is my story, because also it's just really not safe, just from a well-being point. But yeah, I think looking back, I grew alongside Past Life, and that was what was really lovely, was to see how the show had progressed, but also being able to reflect and see how much as an artist I had. And so I think the language of the piece just became me in the end, which is nothing wrong with it, but I guess to answer your question, oh no, I guess we'll bring it back to the original question. I guess I don't think I write plays ever for me, so I can't say no, I'm never going to, or yes, I'm going to, because for me,
you might slot yourself in at the end if you see fit.
Yeah, if others see fit. I think I really, that it has to feel right for the piece. And for me, my inspo when it comes to making work is to talk to an audience who don't see themselves on stages and don't see their stories told, and that's working class, disabled people telling stories instead of other people taking our experiences, putting it on a stage and it being so unattainable, wrong and stereotypical that it does the complete opposite of what we want to do. And I always say, like, I'm never going to be like Prime Minister or change the world, but what I can do with my work is change one person's life.
And that does change the world, I think. There's a ripple effect, isn't there? And I think that, if a young theatre maker comes to see your show and it changes their life, then they'll make art that changes other people's lives, and it just goes on and on and on like that, doesn't it? And also I think, you're absolutely right, there was a period of time, and there continues to be probably lots of shows about sexual assault. However, how many of those shows are accessible?
Probably not.
Exactly.
No,
and the challenge that was set for you was to create a show about any subject that was accessible. And if bringing subjects that maybe are in the mainstream and maybe are being talked about to an audience that might not normally get to engage with it because people don't think about them when they're creating work, then that is, a really beautiful mission. And I think it's something that, it doesn't have to necessarily be your experience. It's I'm bringing you this subject because I know that you might be interested in this conversation.
That's it. It's for me, right now in my practice, my work isn't about my disabled identity or anyone else's. It's not about our oppression. It's the least interesting thing about me is that I'm disabled. I've got far more entertaining things to say or share, and I want to be able to make work for the mainstream. I say with quote marks, whatever the mainstream is. I guess I want to be able to make work that is artistically fulfilling and dynamic in its storytelling, that just so happens to be accessible. And I think that's been clear since that first day where I sat down for my MA and just was like, okay, I want to make a piece, and I really easily could have gone down that route. It's not to say that there isn't space for people to take their stories and make that kind of work, absolutely, but for me to really create a change within the art sector, it's going to take making really, really fresh, new, dynamic pieces of work, embedding creative access in a way that hasn't been seen before, with really easy and simple devices that can create as much noise as possible, so that the people with the money and the people with the capacity to be able to can really look at their practice and change and fix up. Because I think we're all sick of a Tuesday matinee being the only captioned performance, or the BSL interpreter being all the way at the other side of the stage, or there just completely being no capacity for an audio description conversation. And for me, audio description is the cheapest thing to do. It comes down to how you've written the text. And one day I would love for universities to be far more interested in teaching their up and coming writers on their degrees to be far more descriptive within their language. Charlie Miles is a fantastic playwright who, There Are No Beginnings was already had a layer of audio description just etched within the writing.
Gorgeous.
That we can just really take these subtle changes and create work. It doesn't mean accessible work doesn't have to be disabled led or about our disabled identity in order for it to be important. And I think that is a real driving force behind, I think, where my work is and will continue to go. And something that's just because it's fresh in my head, we've just come out of the Creative Access R&D forfeit, full of predominantly disabled people creating magic in the space together. And one of the actors left a really lovely note in our final checkout about how one of the languages within the piece, which is something that we were trying to understand, like what's the audio descriptive language, what's the captioning language. One of the languages within it is the unspoken relationship, the unspoken understanding between these characters, that allyship, and that relates to our disabled identity. It's never said on stage. It's never said in the text at the minute. Who knows who anyone is? But seeing how we and they accommodated for each other's disabilities on stage says far more than it ever needs to be written down. And again, just focusing on the oppression of minority communities. It's not. It's counterintuitive for us to continue to be seen only for our oppression when we've got far more compelling stories to tell.
Absolutely. And it sort of feels like, as marginalised communities, we are pigeonholed into only being allowed to tell stories about our oppression so that we don't have time to tell stories about anything else. And it is kind of one of those ultimate forms of continually oppressing us, I think.
Yes, there's a subconscious subgenre within the moment a piece of theatre is accessible. It's subtle and nobody will admit it, but it changes how it's marketed. It's as minor as that. And
but that minor thing can be such a major thing. And it's just the idea that if something is accessible, it lives over here, and if something is mainstream, it lives over here. And it's like, well, why can't it be both? Why does mainstream not mean literally accessible? Because why should it be mainstream if it's not accessible to everyone and everybody?
That's it.
It's really frustrating. And you hit on something earlier about kind of intersectionality and having a BSL interpreter who's really far away means that if you are both hard of hearing and you have a visual impairment, how are you supposed to engage with this work? You've got no chance.
No, and it just takes you away completely from the art going on stage. It's just counterintuitive if it's not in all cases, but in most, just really defeats the purpose of going to the effort of doing that. Especially, I think, actually, if you link it to the work that organisations do to reach those communities. I think we've all been in situations, I think, when we work around like consultancy and working to make things more inclusive, where people might have their morals might be in the right place and their heart might be in the right place and they're doing it for the right reasons, but we're not reaching out to those audiences to come. So thus we're just hiring a BSL interpreter to stand so far away from the stage, but there isn't anyone who requires a BSL interpreter there because that theatre may not have done any community outreach or just given the time to engage, and that's when you fall into the tick box mentality. And there's loopholes everywhere, and we're all, I think one of the biggest things I say is like we're all making it up as we go along. And what I say today, in 2 years I might look back at and be like, you knew nothing then. Because we're all trying to go, how can we make it better?
But it's about integrity and it's about intention, isn't it? And ultimately, if your primary priority is ticking a box rather than actually genuinely catering for a community, then you have no integrity. And you're probably not going to cater for that community at all, and you should feel ashamed about ticking that box.
It's really clear. It's really clear when you're being brought into a room.
You can tell.
You can absolutely tell. It's fascinating, and I think there's been so many times where I might be brought in as a consultant for audio description or captions like a week before production.
Oof.
And it's, for me, it's like we should be putting captioning and creative access and design at the same level as our lighting and our sound and our stages, because every stage can embed captions if they want to, whilst keeping that artistic ambition and goal and priority. They can match together, but the only way I think that will change is when we start to be able to see them at the same level, not an afterthought. But again, the problem there comes from those with money. So my beef isn't with the people that are putting on studio performances with an under 30k ace bid, because Lord, that is hard and I commend you. It's the people that have money that continue to have one show in a 6-week run that may be accessible to one community. It's just not enough anymore.
It's not. No. And ultimately, you know, we talk about this with all parts of representation, you know, whether it's making sure that, you know, a broad cross-section of people in this country in terms of race and religion and, you know, disability and class and gender and sexuality. All of these things need to be represented on stage and on screen. But the only way that that's really going to happen in an authentic way is if the people behind the scenes are also representative of society, the society that we live in. Because only really then will they be able to prioritise making sure that people are authentically represented on stage and that the audiences are catered for in the way that they deserve to be as well. Yeah,
absolutely echo that.
So I know you've been doing some screen work recently that you cannot speak about, but what I would love for you to speak about, if you can, is how different it is doing stage work and screen work, and particularly what that's like navigating as a disabled artist.
Ooh. They're two different worlds, aren't they? It's crazy, and I love them both for completely different reasons. Navigating it as a disabled person in the situations that I've been in with my screen work have been some of the most welcoming and warm, which is great. I'm aware that not everyone has that experience, so I kind of hold on to the positives that I've been really graciously given. Not just on like my latest work, but like previous, like Doctors was probably one of the most, like, BBC I guess have done a lot of work with being really behind the scenes inclusive and checking in. Again, that's just my experience. Don't come for me, but
I guess to some degree the BBC have had to kind of fix up, because they've been, you know, called out for failing in the past. Absolutely. And so I think any wins, any improvements that we've seen within the last year or so have been hard fought by people like yourself. You know, shouting loudly and doing the work. I
think Dank, Triple C, based in Manchester, have been doing mega work. I've been a part of them. I'm part of their visually impaired focus group, but I've been a member of Dank, I think, from like the early days, and they were really integral with doing a lot of work with Hollyoaks.
Yes.
And just it really igniting these conversations within the TV landscape within the UK. It's really mad to see how well they've done in like the best possible way, because people seem open to having those conversations. I think when it comes to theatre, if the right people, and maybe that's probably it. If the right people are behind the scenes when it comes to theatre, the experience is a lot better. But I've probably experienced more ableism within theatre than I have TV.
Same.
Which is ridiculous. Yeah. But also, if I like really think about it, I'm not surprised, because there's so much more money in TV and bigger production teams and a level of respect, maybe, that can often feel lost when it comes to theatre, that has led to some really bizarre experiences, I'm sure you can relate to.
Yeah, and I've definitely had the experience of, let us know how we can help, And then when you actually let them know how
Yeah.
they can help, it's, oh, that's actually really inconvenient for us.
Yeah.
Or it's not in the budget.
Yes.
Or, you know, and then it's like, well, don't ask me how you can help if you're not going to follow through, because that's a waste of all our time.
It's exactly that.
Yeah.
I think there's a fast pacedness when it comes to TV that can make it quite difficult. The beauty of theatre is that you have the time and space, but sometimes you lose the support. And then when TV in this fast paced nature, where you may be getting scripts that have changed last minute, there's somebody right there to be like, can you make this bigger for me, because I can't see that, and it's done without any question.
And it should be, because that's really just the basics, isn't it?
Right.
You know.
Yeah. But I think I've been quite fortunate, incredibly fortunate, to be honest, for the experiences that I've had within that world, because I'm aware that there's a lot changing within that, and I think we're marginally ahead when it comes to television on-set experiences, especially in the UK, than we are when it comes to theatre.
Yeah.
And again, maybe that links to just this like need and want and desire to really advocate for levelling up the changes that I've witnessed within the TV world that aren't matching up when it comes to theatre, because when the right people are in charge, I've been able to create spaces where people have been and felt seen and heard for the first time in their careers, and that's a really overwhelmingly wonderful thing to hear. But it's also harrowing when it should just, what I am doing to me feels normal and not anything special.
Yeah.
And that needs to change. It's really fascinating, actually, when you think about it.
If you could say one thing to, the people behind the scenes who are kind of the money bags, the gatekeepers, the artistic directors, people who are kind of in charge of running buildings and running companies and kind of deciding what sort of experience artists are going to have when they work within this industry, what would you say to them?
Just one thing. We don't say what we say to be negative and critique you. We say it because we want to build up and make changes with you. Give us the space and capacity to engage with you. Feel free and open to ask your questions. Don't be afraid of messing up, because it's the only way any of us have learned. I think often, and I say this so many times, people feel, and I get it, scared to engage with the disabled discourse if they don't identify as disabled. But often, and hopefully this again should change, but often the people in charge are non-disabled. And I can absolutely understand that from an outside, it's quite scary to kind of come into a community that are full of rage and full of seeking changes and often calling you out. Yeah. But we're not doing that for the sake of doing that. And we're not like that all the time. We're only like that when you push us to be like that. We all just want to make art and make really good art that everyone can experience.
Yeah.
So just have those questions and find that person within this community that you click with and use them as a soundboard to build up and find that community. Because I hear you that it's scary, but I promise you it's worth it, and we can make changes together. We're not trying just to go against you. We want to work with you. I think that's a big thing.
Beautiful. And what advice would you give any emerging theatre makers or people who want to get into telly? What advice would you give them?
Apply for everything. I think genuinely everything I've ever got, I have applied for thinking I wouldn't get, and then did. The worst thing that's going to happen is a no.
Yeah.
So just apply for everything. Make it up as you go along, darling. Honestly, because we all are. Write down any ideas you have on a notes app, and if an application is open that you think, I could probably finesse a quick application, just do it.
Yeah.
Trust yourself and trust where you see the piece going, because for every person that's believed in me, there's been somebody doubting me at every single point. That's absolutely fair, but the only person you have to focus on is yourself. So don't let that hold you back. And if you know where you want to go, and you know where you want your piece to go, or you know where you want to go as an actor, keep going and pursuing, and find those people who you can fall back on when it gets hard. Because it's not an easy industry, but you are just as welcome and here as everyone else, no matter your background. And fall and mess up and get back up again and carry on, because it takes one person to believe in you for everything to change. And have fun. We're just playing pretend at the end of the day, aren't we?
We're literally playing. That's why it's called a play.
Exactly. Yeah.
So speaking of plays, finally, can you just tell our audience about where we can see Fade and when we can see Fade?
Yes! So Fade will be debuting at the Lowry on the 4th and 5th of April 2024, which is the year you're watching this. And then we are going to Leeds Playhouse the week commencing the 21st of April. I cannot remember the dates. 25th, 26th, 27th. If it's not that, it's the 24th, 25th, 26th. We've got 3 nights there.
Lovely.
And wicked, yeah, check out my socials. We've got Fade, Twitter. I'm sure by this point we'll have been documenting some really, really fun stuff from the rehearsal room.
A whole Fade documentary.
There will be. There will be somewhere. This is so funny because I know that in the time between me now and this coming out, boy, I need to go and write.
She'll be a whole different person by
I'll have some makeup on.
I hope that some things stay the same.
Anyway, no, I'm excited, really, really excited to hopefully see some of the people that are listening and watching this there. It was a really special play. I'm really excited.
I'm really excited to see it. Alice Christina Corrigan, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today.
Always. Thank you for having me.